When Jesus had tasted it, he said, "It is finished." Then he bowed his head and released his spirit. Would you pray with me? Oh God, it has not always been a pleasant journey. Some of the words have tugged at our hearts, as they may very well do again today. And yet we have the privilege of knowing these are not your final words. The final words of this story of our faith will come next Sunday as we boldly proclaim, He is risen. Help us to understand what happened this week so that we can fully grasp what takes place next Sunday. Take the words of my mouth and twist and turn them into what form you want them to be so that they touch the hearts of all of your people. May they be pleasing in your sight, as well as the meditations of all of our hearts this day and forevermore. Through Jesus, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. So I look around, I see various generations in our congregation, and I want to tell you that I feel bad because I think some of the younger generations didn't get a piece that we got in the older generations. Unless you had a police chief as a dad. We grew up, in most of our generations, with a very fine sense of right and wrong. Did you not? You knew the difference between good and bad, good and evil. From the time you were born, it started to get instilled in you. You got the teachers tried to put it there, your parents tried to put it there, your grandparents tried to put it there, the police tried to put it, just everybody, we just had a really fine sense of that at one time in this country. You knew growing up in school that an A was good, a D was bad. You knew that fighting in school was bad. Coming home without a black eye was good. You knew if you were at my house, it was like, I don't care what you do, but if you lie to me, because lying's bad. Telling the truth is good. We even had it down to the point where they would tell you what foods were good and bad, right? Now, I hate to disagree with some of our nutritionists, and Julia, please forgive me, but to this day, I still think liver is evil. Just the way I am. Just the way I am. But if you stop and think about it, even our entertainment had the same theme running throughout it, right? All the good cowboys the sheriff wore what color? And all the outlaws like Jesse James wore? We knew that. When the Lone Ranger came onto the scene, you knew he was the good guy even though he had the mask on because he was dressed in white. Star Wars, if you look at that saga, Luke Skywalker wore white. And Darth Vader, no trouble figuring out the difference between good and evil. I tell you all that to tell you this. That's the story of this book. If you look at the overarching theme of this book in your faith, it's a battle between good and evil. And I just opened my Bible this week as I was doing this and started looking at some of the different stories, and it's from the very beginning. Cain was bad, Abel was good. Correct? David, good. Goliath, bad. And it runs on Noah, good. The rest of the earth, bad. Lot, good. Sodom and Gomorrah, bad. You have both sides of all of that in these stories. Moses was a little bad to start out with, but he ended up good. The people in Pharaoh were bad. Are you catching it? You understand what I'm trying to get at here? Because, I mean, we got Daniel good, lions bad. Elijah, good. Jezebel, bad. And it just, every story I looked at as I went through that, it was just a repeat of that same theme. Good versus evil. Good versus evil. I'd like to tell you that that all ended at the Old Testament. But I'd be lying. Matter of fact, it kind of increases when I look at the New Testament. There's a couple stories where you have just one or two players, but to me, the whole New Testament is this. Jesus good, all of us. Yeah. Romans 3:23 tells you, no? We have all sinned. We all fall short of the glory of God. It doesn't say Mike Corwin or Phil or any of the other names that I could go around here and say, especially Jim. It says all of us, every one of us has fallen short. Every one of us has a little bit of that dirty blackness on us from sin. And then it tells you, if you jump ahead a couple of chapters to Romans 6, it says, and the wages of sin is... The wages of sin is build a gallows, Sheriff, because we need to hang them somewhere. What I want you to catch today as we look at these last sets of words is this. The battle that was waged on that cross started at the very beginning of this book. The very first story of our relationship to God was one of good and evil, was it not? It started in the garden. Perfection. Everything's gone along wide. And then the evil one, Satan, the devil, the big red dude, whatever you want to call him this morning, slithered in and got us to eat the fruit. The very first story, good and bad. And from that day forward, it was a battle between God and the devil. I want you to understand the magnitude of the war that's being waged in this season we call Lent. Jesus Christ, God did what nobody would have expected him to do. God says, I'll fool them. I know they're bad, but you know what? We'll make a way. And he did the unexpected thing. He didn't just send more fire and brimstone like he did on Sodom and Gomorrah. He didn't flood the earth again. He sent his Son to be a sacrifice for that evil. And from the very beginning, from the moment that Jesus Christ was born, you see the evil one starting to work on that battlefield again, don't you? His puppet at that time, his hair, you remember, killed all the little boys? The fight was on. And Jesus grew up, escaped the murder scene, and grew up and began his ministry. And if you read the book of Luke or any of them, it'll lead you up to the point that when he was about 30 or 33, we're not sure of his age, he went out into the desert, or first he got baptized by John, then he went out into the desert for 40 days, and who was there to tempt him? See, I just get this sense of the Satan saying, battle on. Here we go. And he tempted him what? Trying to get him to jump off a building so God would catch him. Trying to get him to turn stones into bread so that he would use other means than the ones that God wanted him to use. Trying to get him to fall down and worship him. And every time he just go to give him a scripture and said, no, I don't think so. But did you ever pay attention to the last verse of that story? You think the battle's not on? In chapter 4, as he finishes the scene in the desert as his temptation, the last verse of that passage says this. When the devil had finished tempting Jesus, he left him until the next opportunity came. What's that old saying that we have in our vocabulary is, I might lose the battle, but I'll win the war. That's exactly the attitude that the evil one has here. And he left him until the next... In other words, I'm looking for the chink in your armor, Jesus. I'm looking for my chance here. It's not over till it's over. As soon as you let your guard down, I will be there. This is a battle between the Prince of Heaven and the Prince of Earth. It's that simple. It's that easy. Because then Jesus went and did his thing, and he taught for 3 years, and he rode into Jerusalem on this day, on Palm Sunday, and he had a big plan and a big parade, and they were waving bush branches and throwing their coats, and everybody was happy and celebrating. It'd be like the last day of the Fratwurst Festival. That just sent a shiver down my spine. And Jesus knew exactly what he was doing, did he not? That's exactly why he flipped the tables in the temple, because he knew it would trip the trigger of the Pharisees, and guess who they were working for? It wasn't God anymore. They had become puppets too, had they not? And Satan saw his chance. Saw his chance. If you read the beginning of what we call the Passion story, which is the death of Jesus Christ, which is what happened on the cross, we read these words as he begins the Last Supper. Chapter 22, verse 3 says, "Then Satan entered into Judas Iscariot." Nowhere else in the Bible will you see that phrase that Satan entered in. He smells the kill. He smells blood. He has found the chink in the armor, or so he thinks. And he gets another puppet besides Herod to do his dirty work. It says Satan entered in, and we all know what happened then, for 30 pieces of silver. He sold him down a river. But let me prove it to you in another way. They have the Last Supper. They go out to the garden. Jesus prays with all of his vim and vigor until he sweats blood. And they come and arrest him, and as they arrest him, he's going, why didn't you take me to the temple? I was there every day. And then he says this, "But this is your moment. The time when the power of darkness reigns." The time when the power of darkness reigns. See, what I want you to understand is, this isn't an isolated scene that we celebrate once a year. This has gone on since the beginning of time. This is a war, and it's a war for guess who? You. And Satan thought, this is my moment. I will reign now. And he finds enough puppets like Pilate and the religious leaders in the crowd that shouts, "Crucify, crucify." And he was probably laughing with glee as they took him down to the courtyard and beat him till the skin fell off, and probably had little chuckles. They put the thorns on his head. I'm guessing that as they stripped him naked, spit on him, and mocked him, that he was just in the height of his glory. And I'm guessing as they drove the nails in the cross and hoisted him in the air, he went, yeah. I'm even guessing that as he looked out over the crowd and said, "Forgive him," that Satan probably says, "Well, what power do you have? You're nailed to a tree. Who do you think you are?" I'm guessing that he really enjoyed it when he uttered those words, my God, why have you forsaken me?" and thought that even the God in heaven who had cast him down to the earth probably turned his back on his own son, and now he knows he's got him. Knows he's got him. And as humanity takes over, he says, "I thirst," and Satan goes, "Come on, you're dragging us out way too long." And I have no doubt in my mind that as Jesus looked up and said, "It is finished," that the devil thought that those were words of surrender, words of defeat. But I'm here to tell you today, they weren't. Remember, Jesus knew he was going to die. Jesus knew what was going to happen when he rode in. His disciples said, "You don't go to Jerusalem, they're going to kill you." He said, "So?" Jesus had told them at the Last Supper that all this was coming. He knew it was coming. He was willingly there to do it. He had told them a year ahead of time that he was going to come to this moment. He wasn't crying defeat. He was crying victory. This was his mission. This is why he got sent. God asked him to do it, to save the rest of creation, to save you and me. So when he said it is finished, he meant, my job's done. I win. This was a cry of, as hard as it is to look at that scene and see a celebration, we as Christians, and knowing what's going to happen in 3 days, should see this as a time of celebration. Because when he died, we were saved. It's that simple. His mission wasn't over until he died. If he'd have climbed down off the cross and said, "Change my mind," we wouldn't be here today. We'd be waiting for the next Hale-Bopp comet to come save us. That's a cry of victory. That's an in-your-face, I win. And I see that same thing in the very last words from the cross. By this time it was about noon, and darkness fell across the whole land until 3 o'clock. The light from the sun was gone, and suddenly the curtain in the sanctuary of the temple was torn down the middle. Then Jesus shouted, "Father, into your hands I entrust my spirit." And with these words he breathed his last. When the Roman officer overseeing the execution saw what had happened, he worshipped God and said, "Surely this man was innocent." See, I see this moment, and we talk about this at Bible study on Thursday night. I see this moment kind of like when Michelangelo got done painting the Sistine Chapel. Can't you just see him standing back going, "Ta-da!" I think that this is Jesus' ta-da moment. He's doing what he came to do. He's defeated evil, and he knows that Satan might be laughing today, but on Sunday it's going to be a whole different story. And then I read these words, and here's what they tell me. Number one, I think the 3 hours of darkness from noon until he died at 3 is probably supposed to be a forerunner of those 3 days in the dark tomb. The light of the earth will be extinguished for those 3 days. The same one that was with God at the beginning and to creation will not shine for 3 days. But that's okay. This is only Friday. Sunday's coming.